You've bought another Apple cable. Again, that's the third one this year, and it's only March. Same spot every time, right? Right where the white rubber meets that little metal plug, the cable starts to fray, then the wires peek through. Then one morning you wake up and your phone's at 12% because the cable died overnight. And here's what drives you crazy. Your friend bought some random cable at a gas station for $5. Still works perfectly after 2 years. Meanwhile, you spent $30 at the Apple store 6 months ago, and you're already seeing copper wire. What's actually going on here? Here's what nobody wants to admit. Apple makes some of the most durable, well-engineered devices on the planet. Your iPhone could probably survive a zombie apocalypse, but their cables, they're designed to fail at that exact spot you're thinking about right now. And it's not an accident. In the next 15 minutes, you're going to understand exactly why this happens, why that specific failure point exists, and what's really behind the most profitable design flaw in tech history. Because once you see how this works, you'll never look at an Apple product the same way again. So let's talk about why a company that can engineer a phone to survive a 6-foot drop somehow can't make a cable that lasts longer than a gallon of milk. Here's what's really happening. You're at your desk. Your phone's charging. The cable's stretched at a weird angle because the outlet's behind your nightstand. You're scrolling through Instagram, and the cable's bent 90 degrees right where it connects to your phone. You do this every single night. Doesn't seem like a big deal, right? But here's the thing. That bend creates stress. Every single time you charge your phone at an angle, you're creating a weak point. And that weak point is always in the exact same spot, right where the cable meets the connector. Think about it this way. Bend a paperclip back and forth enough times, and it snaps. Same principle. But here's where things get interesting. Apple knows this happens. They've known since the first iPhone. They've sold billions of cables. They've read millions of complaints. They've seen the one-star reviews and the viral tweets and the Reddit threads dedicated entirely to this problem. And yet, every new cable they make has the same design, same materials, same failure point. Why? Everyone tells you it's because Apple uses cheap materials. That's what the YouTube tech reviewers say. That's what your friend who knows about this stuff tells you. But that's not what actually happens. Apple uses something called thermoplastic elastomer, TPE for short. It's actually a really sophisticated material. It's flexible, it's durable, it feels premium in your hand. It's the same stuff they use in medical devices and car parts. So the material isn't cheap. The material is fine. The problem is what's missing. Look at any other cable. Your laptop charger, your old Android cable, that random one you bought at Target. They all have something. Apple cables don't. A thick, stiff section right where the cable meets the plug. That's called strain relief. Strain relief does exactly what it sounds like. It relieves strain. When you bend the cable, that reinforced section distributes the stress across a larger area instead of concentrating it at one tiny point. It's basic engineering. It's been around forever. Apple's cables have strain relief too, but here's the thing. It's tiny. Almost useless. If you compare an Apple cable to literally any other cable on your desk, the difference is obvious. Apple's strain relief section is maybe ½ an inch. Other cables, 2 inches, 3 inches, some even longer. And this matters because physics doesn't care about aesthetics. When you bend a cable, the stress has to go somewhere. If there's no strain relief, all that stress concentrates at the weakest point, which is right where the flexible cable meets the rigid connector. That's where the bend happens. That's where the stress builds up. That's where your cable dies. But here's what nobody wants to admit. Apple knows exactly how to fix this. They could make the strain relief longer. They could use reinforced materials. They could redesign the connector. They've got some of the best engineers on the planet. They choose not to. Let me show you what I call the aesthetic trap. This is where design philosophy overrides functional engineering. And Apple's been caught in this trap since day one. Here's how it works. Apple's entire brand identity is built on minimalism, clean lines, sleek profiles, products that look like they came from the future. Steve Jobs famously obsessed over every millimeter. Jony Ive designed products that belonged in art museums. And cables? Cables are ugly. They're functional. They're utilitarian. They're the opposite of beautiful. So Apple makes them as thin and minimal as possible. The strain relief section that should be thick and functional, They make it barely visible because a chunky strain relief section would ruin the aesthetic. It would look clunky. It would feel cheap. It's like when you order furniture online and it looks amazing in the photo but falls apart after 3 months. Same thing happens with Apple Cable's computer. The design looks incredible, feels premium, photographs beautifully, but it's engineered to fail. And here's what makes this particularly sneaky. Most people don't blame Apple when their cable breaks. They blame themselves. I must have bent it too much. I should have been more careful. I'm too rough with my stuff. You're not too rough. You're using it normally. The cable's just not designed for normal use. Think about how you actually use your phone. You're lying in bed, scrolling, the cable's bent. You're sitting at your desk and the outlet's in a weird spot. The cable's bent. You're in your car and your phone's in the cup holder. The cable's bent. Every single day, multiple times a day, you're bending that cable at the connection point, because that's how humans use phones. We don't set them flat on a table with the cable pointing straight out. We hold them at angles. We move around. We live our lives. Apple designs cables for a world where phones stay perfectly flat and cables extend in straight lines. That world doesn't exist. But here's where things get really interesting. Apple's not stupid. They know their cables break. They've got decades of data on this. They've done the engineering analysis. They know exactly how long their cables last. And they're okay with it. Let me show you what I call the replacement revenue pattern. This is where product failure becomes a feature, not a bug. Here's the math. An Apple Lightning cable costs $30. The actual manufacturing cost? Probably $3 to $5. So there's a massive margin built in. Now, think about how many iPhone users exist. Over 1 billion worldwide. In the US alone, there's probably 150 million iPhone users. What if just half of those users need to replace their cable once a year? That's 75 million cables at $30 each. That's $2.25 billion just from charging cables every single year. Now add the fact that some people replace their cables 2 or 3 times a year. Add the people who buy extras to keep in their car or office. Add the people who buy the longer cables or the braided ones. The numbers get wild fast. But here's what makes this even more profitable. Making cables stronger doesn't cost much more. The reinforced strain relief materials, pennies. The slightly different design, one-time engineering cost. They could make cables that last 5 years instead of 1 year, and it would barely affect their manufacturing costs. But it would absolutely destroy that replacement revenue. Your brain does this because it's pattern recognition gone wrong. Back when we were hunter-gatherers, if a tool broke, we blamed ourselves or bad luck. We didn't have the concept of planned obsolescence. We didn't think about companies engineering failure into products. So when your Apple cable breaks, your brain defaults to the ancient pattern, I must have done something wrong. It doesn't occur to you that maybe the product was designed to break. That feels too cynical. Too conspiracy theory. But in today's world of quarterly earnings reports and shareholder pressure, building products that break on schedule isn't cynical. It's just business. And here's the thing. Apple's not even the worst offender. They're just the most obvious because their products are so ubiquitous. HP does this with printer ink. John Deere does this with tractor parts. Tesla does this with their repair ecosystem. It's called the consumable product strategy. You sell the main product once, the iPhone, the printer, the tractor. But then you create an ecosystem of replaceable parts that people have to keep buying forever. The iPhone is the hook. The cable is the subscription. Now here's what nobody talks about. There's actually a term for this in engineering. It's called designed life expectancy. Every product has one. Your car is designed to last maybe 150,000 miles. Your washing machine, maybe 10 years. Your phone battery, about 500 charge cycles. Engineers literally calculate how long they want something to last. They choose materials and designs based on that target. It's not evil, it's just engineering reality. Nothing lasts forever, so you have to design for a specific time frame. But here's where it gets sketchy. Most companies design for durability within reason. They want their products to last long enough that you're happy, but not so long that you never buy again. It's a balance. Apple seems to have calculated that balance differently. Their iPhones last for years. Their MacBooks are tanks. But their cables? 6 months to a year. Why the difference? Because replacing a cable doesn't hurt. $30 feels annoying, but it's not enough to make you switch to Android. It's not enough to make you angry at Apple. It's just enough to be frustrating. But replacing an iPhone? That's $1,000. That would make you angry. That would make you switch brands. That would hurt Apple's reputation. So they found the sweet spot. Make the expensive stuff durable. Make the cheap accessories disposable. Keep the replacement costs just low enough that you're annoyed but not angry enough to leave the ecosystem. It's brilliant, honestly. And it works. Let me tell you about two people. Same iPhone, same usage patterns, completely different cable experiences. Meet Jessica. She's had her iPhone 14 for about 18 months. She's on her 4th lightning cable. Every single one died in the same spot. She's frustrated, but she keeps buying official Apple cables because she assumes the third-party ones are worse. Here's what Jessica doesn't realize. She charges her phone on her nightstand. The outlet's behind the furniture, so the cable has to bend at a sharp angle. She scrolls through TikTok before bed with her phone plugged in. The cable's under tension for hours every night at a 90-degree angle. She's careful with her stuff. She's not yanking the cable. She's not stepping on it. She's just using her phone normally. But that nightly charging routine, it's creating thousands of stress cycles at that weak point. Every single night, bend and unbend. Bend and unbend. Jessica thinks she's unlucky. She thinks maybe she got defective cables. She doesn't realize the cable's performing exactly as designed. It's lasting just long enough to not seem like a scam, but short enough to keep her buying replacements. Now meet Marcus. Marcus has had the same lightning cable for 3 years. Same phone model as Jessica. Uses it just as much. But his cable still works perfectly. No fraying, no exposed wires, nothing. What's Marcus doing differently? Marcus understood something after his first cable died. He looked at where it broke and realized it was always the bend point. So he changed his setup. He moved his outlet closer to his bed. He uses a cable organizer that keeps the cable straight. When he's using his phone while charging, he holds it in a way that doesn't create sharp angles. Marcus also did something clever. He bought a cheap cable protector, those little spring things you can get for $3 on Amazon. He slid it over the weak point on his Apple cable. Now, when the cable bends, the stress distributes across the spring instead of concentrating at one spot. Marcus doesn't have stronger cables. He doesn't have special cables. He just understands the failure pattern and works around it. Notice how different their experiences are? Same product, same company, same design flaw. But Marcus sees the system. Jessica's trapped in it. So what's really going on here? It's not actually about cheap materials at all. It's about intentional design choices that prioritize aesthetics and revenue over durability. The people who succeed at keeping their cables alive don't have some special gentle touch. They understand where the stress happens and they prevent it. Apple could fix this tomorrow. They could add half an inch of reinforced strain relief. It would add maybe 50 cents to the manufacturing cost. The cable would look slightly less sleek and the replacement revenue would drop by billions. They're not going to do that. These patterns aren't personal failures. They're predictable traps that catch everyone who doesn't understand the underlying design philosophy. But now that you understand why that specific point fails, you can work around it. You can buy cable protectors, you can change your charging setup, you can position your outlets better, you can buy third-party cables with better strain relief, or you can just be aware of the angles and stress points and adjust how you use your phone. The cable's going to break eventually. That's physics. But understanding why it breaks gives you control over when. So here's what we've uncovered. Apple's cable failures aren't accidents or quality control issues. They're the result of design philosophy that values appearance over longevity, combined with a business model that profits from replacement cycles. The tiny strain relief creates a predictable failure point. The premium materials can't overcome basic engineering principles, and the $30 replacement cost hits the sweet spot where you're annoyed but not angry enough to leave the ecosystem. Plus, there's the psychological component. We blame ourselves instead of the product. We think we're too rough or unlucky. We don't recognize that we're experiencing exactly what the design intended, and that keeps us buying replacements without questioning the system. The question isn't whether your Apple cable will break. The question is whether you'll recognize the pattern when it starts to fray. Because now you know it's not about being more careful, it's about understanding where the stress concentrates and working around a design that was never meant to last. So next time you're at the Apple store holding another $30 lightning cable, ask yourself this: am I replacing a broken product, or am I buying into a system that's designed to keep me replacing it forever? Because once you see how the pattern works, you can't unsee it. And maybe that's when you decide to spend $3 on a spring cable protector instead of $30 on another cable that's engineered to fail in the exact same spot. Your cable's gonna break, but now you know why. And knowing why changes everything about how you see that little white cord and the company that made it.